It's Today in Putnam County with Shan Stout.
Hi everyone, welcome to Today in Putnam County. I'm Shan Stout, your host, and I am here with a wonderful guest today. So you'll want to hang with us because we have an author on board in the interview chair, along with my co-host Tessa Davis. And Tessa, of course, is with the Visitors Bureau here in Cookeville. But we are talking about our guest of honor today, and it is already a pleasure to meet you behind the scenes. So I'm looking forward to this interview. For anyone who knows me, I have a background in publishing, so I appreciate an author and all the hard work that goes behind the scenes. But today we are talking about your brand new book, From Gavel to Grace.
Yes.
And I'm inspired to know, first off, your origin story. You've got a very complex work history because you're kind of multitasking in the universe right now. And now we're adding a third piece as an author. So we have Brett Knight. Now,
Good to be here.
Brett,
Good to be here.
we are so happy to have you on the podcast today. Tessa and I have already been talking about, we've been researching your book and kind of catching up because it just now launched.
It just came out. In fact, we got to
It's
knock
still
off
warm.
it's still hot off the presses. It just came out on Tuesday, so it is. It's brand new. It's the brand new baby that's there.
Congratulations.
So,
okay, it's a pretty substantial
book. I feel like I need to rock it at this point because it's a lot of work to get a book to come out.
So the end goal, of course, is you want people to read it.
Absolutely.
So for potential readers, for our listening and viewing audience, tell us first off what is the synopsis of this book, because it feels pretty deep.
It is meant to be, and this is what I have said. This is what inspired me as I began to write it. It's not something I thought of after I wrote it. It's a field manual, so it's meant to be practical. It's a field manual for people who are struggling through addiction into recovery and the people who love them. And that second part is a really heavy part that often gets overlooked, the people who love them. Because I have sat in my living room and I've sat in the boardroom of my office with so many mothers, so many fathers, so many wives and husbands and brothers and sisters and people who love somebody who's struggling in addiction.
And it does, to stop you there, not just the immediate family, but the extended family is affected as well. There are a lot of people that suffer through the perils of what addiction creates within a family unit.
Absolutely. I like to say that addiction is not a sniper rifle. Mm-hmm. It doesn't target a person and take them out. It's a hand grenade. It takes out everybody in the room.
Wow.
Everybody who's close to them, their family members. In fact, I would challenge that there's probably not a group of people larger than the three of us sitting here that you could find that there isn't some impact into their lives, directly or indirectly, because of addiction. Whether it's a coworker, a family member, somebody they love, somebody they went to school with. Our community is impacted heavily by it. So I wrote this book because I had access to information. I have access to things that have occurred that I knew that people were literally dying to get their hands on. And so families were dying, people were dying, communities are dying because they need to know more about what does recovery look like. Is it even possible to recover? Or should we just throw our hands up and just give up? And so I wanted to write this book to put that information into the hands because even though I love being able to sit down and talk with family members, I can't be in everybody's living room. But I knew that the great power of a book, great power of things such as podcasts, is that you and I can talk about this. I can write about this. And then people who will never meet us will hear about it and they'll receive this information.
So let's talk about the fact, I love the privacy of your own home to read a book, but it also makes you not feel alone. It makes you feel seen. My family has a history. I had a relative who, bless their heart, they broke their neck in a car accident and got hooked on opioids, and never throughout their life, no matter how many times they had gone to rehab, they did not recover in the end. It was a very hard journey, and our family, it really causes a lot of strain and you're trying to support them, and
Right.
and but that addiction sometimes comes first to that person.
Absolutely.
Until they decide that they're strong enough
Yeah.
to overcome it. And that's a hard thing to watch when you feel helpless on the other side. So I appreciate that this gives both perspectives,
Yes.
hope for an addiction and understanding of being seen by the
Correct.
family. So let's talk about, you say you can't be in every home and talk to everyone. Let's talk about your background, because
Okay.
you have a very special role while you would be talking to
Right,
families.
absolutely. I wear a lot of hats, and in fact, I think it is switching those hats that's caused me to lose all the hair that I've got. I wear a lot of hats. A lot of people would know me in this community because I have a law practice. I'm a criminal defense attorney, where in my role in my law office, I work as a criminal defense attorney. I work in the criminal courts. I often say I don't do child support, divorces, and things of that nature. I plant myself firmly in the criminal courts as a criminal defense attorney. Prior to that, I was a prosecutor for the state of Tennessee, where I prosecuted criminal cases, worked with complex drug cases, wiretaps, things of that nature. So I came from this prosecutor background, prosecuting people who had these drug charges and alcohol-related charges, to a criminal defense attorney standing with somebody as their advocate. I'm also a city judge, so I get to wear all those different hats, and that's my in the conference room hat. But then there's also the in the living room hat, and that is I'm an ordained pastor. And I work heavily in the recovery community. So a lot of people, I may meet them in the courtroom when they're facing some challenges due to some charges that they've got. But I also get to walk with people through recovery.
You see the human side.
And walk with them the whole year that they're in a program. Walk with them after the program. There are men and women in this community who I've met while they were in the middle of addiction, while they were in the trenches, and was able to work with them by seeking recovery, walking them through recovery. And here we're years after they've graduated from these recovery programs. Now I get invited when their babies are being dedicated. I get
Beautiful.
to baptize them. I get to perform marriage ceremonies. They call me whenever they bought their first house. So I get to see that side of it. And that's the really positive side of it. But I won't sit here and act like there's not a darker side of it too. Because anybody who's ever walked with people through recovery, they know the stakes that we play for are high. There are people, and I can sit here as we're talking, and I can think of one young lady who I represented. I got her into recovery. She did great in recovery and graduated recovery. During that time, I was there with her as she accepted the Lord, and I baptized her. She graduated the program, and then months later, she got back with the same circle of people. You see, changing that circle is so important.
Yes.
She got back with that same circle of people, and she relapsed. And because of that, she ended up back in jail again. And I remember seeing her in jail. I wasn't representing her at the time, but I was walking through the jail, and she was in a holding cell. And I saw her, and when she saw me, she dropped her head. And, and there's a lot of shame associated with addiction. And I went into the holding cell, and I talked with her, and I said, don't ever feel like you have to lower your head when you see me. Don't ever be ashamed. I'm still in your corner. I'm still here for you. Well, she served the time that she needed to finish up her violation of probation. Then she got back out. And 3 days after getting out, she overdosed and died.
Oh no.
And, so this person who you walk through recovery with, now you're burying. And so there's that side of it too, which is what I always talk with people about. When you walk with people through recovery, it's in your spirit. It has to be, because otherwise you just run away.
Yes.
I mean, you just run away because it is a hand grenade. It is blowing up everywhere. It's blowing up in our communities, blowing up in people's lives. So you have to, you have those great moments where you see people's lives transformed, and you hold on to those. But then there's also times where you're walking with people through their darkest days. And unfortunately, the consequences in this battle against addiction is, if you don't get a chance to help them, they die.
Yes.
And that's just the reality of what we face. We see it in our news headlines every day.
Well, and the depth of your care is right here, because to go to the trouble, you already are very, very busy.
Yeah.
You're successful in your professional career, but you've seen this struggle and you care. And not to put it lightly, but I've always, in my own personal experience, you talk about that social group, trying not to have them go back to the same comfort comfortable way, the same people, their people that had accepted them for who they are. I think that personal connection, humans need connection.
We do.
And sometimes they gravitate back. And it's just like if you were trying not to eat sugar, but you went back and worked in a bakery.
Exactly.
And like you might be able to make it a week or two, but then you smell those cinnamon rolls and you're done for, right?
You're making me hungry
and
just talking about it.
As humans, we can understand that just self-control is difficult, but self-control is not addiction. Addiction is that substance has literally taken over your mind, your feelings, your actions, and so you have to be strong, but having enablers that are like, come on, man, come on,
It's such an identity stealer. Addiction is an identity stealer.
It labels you too.
And when you remove your identity of who you truly are and what you're truly meant to accomplish, it labels you as somebody false. This false identity of somebody lower than that. It's hard to resist that's who I am. These are the people I belong with, because that identity has been stripped. And that's a big part of what happens in recovery too. Is it's not just about the chemical dependency. It's about reestablishing that identity of who somebody is, and then rewiring the connections in your brain to be able to make good decisions again. The little things like getting up and going to work every day, buying groceries, having a budget, getting your driver's license back, relationships with people that, those got derailed early in your life because you started using drugs when you were 14, and now you don't know what an adult relationship even looks like, with somebody. And so all of that being rebuilt back, that takes time. And it takes people who are willing to come in and talk with them about what a good, healthy relationship looks like, what budgeting looks like, what a job and what taking pride in yourself looks like.
Well, I think this is obviously a ministry for you.
It is.
So again, if say one of our viewers or our listeners say, "Oh my goodness, this resonates with me," I know someone who is struggling with addiction, or I'm a family member who is trying to help someone, and what should they expect to gain from this book? If they pick it up, how is it going to help them?
It's going to provide information that they've been looking for all along. And part of in the book, I talk about the fact that the families that I've interacted with through these years, they seem to have all the heart. They want to do anything and everything it takes to help this loved one. And then you get people who are in the justice system, people who are inside of the system, and they have all the information. But oftentimes they're burned out and they become a little bit jaded. So they have all the information, the family members have all the heart. The idea is, can we get this together? Can we get information into the hands of the people who have this heart and this desire to do whatever it takes? And so that's a lot of what the book is. It walks through, what is it like to be in addiction? And the book is filled with all kinds of stories, firsthand stories of people who have recovered from addiction, those who have been in addiction, those who have worked with people. So all throughout the books, there's going to be a point made, and there's going to be somebody telling you a story about how it really impacted their life. There's a part in there in the book where I talk about the mother who comes to me and says she's so mad at her son who's in addiction, and says, he came to Thanksgiving dinner and he just messed up all of Thanksgiving dinner. Is he mad at me? Is he trying to get back at me because of something I did as a mother? And I have to explain to them, he wasn't even thinking of you. You're thinking that he's trying to get back at you, but I promise you, he's in addiction. He's not even thinking about you. And I know that's hard for you to hear, but it has nothing to do with you. He has this hunger inside of him, and all that he can think about is feeding that hunger. He came there and he wasn't looking to blow anything up because he's not thinking that many steps ahead. He's thinking about, can I go there? Can I find a source of to numb this pain, and can I get, so being able to explain that to loved ones, that first of all, it's not about you, because they're not even thinking of you. And I know that's hard to hear about your loved one, but they're not at that point. And then to explain also that as they begin to go through recovery, things don't just change overnight. They don't get sober after 30 days, and they haven't used for 30 days, and the family members are like, well, why isn't he just thinking right again?
Yes.
It doesn't work that way. So to be able to equip these family members with this kind of information, and then provide them real examples of real people saying, I went through this. My son was that person. I was the mom at home wishing that he would get arrested, because then at least I would know he was alive.
Yes, I've heard that many times.
Those kind of stories in there, so they don't feel alone, and then they're provided with some information. I talk about how you walk through the justice system, what good recovery looks like, what it's like walking through that, what it's like after recovery. So I just really believe that when it comes to family members and people who love people in addiction or in recovery, that they need more information. So that's the part of the book that I'm hoping that it gives hope to those in addiction, that it gives information to those who love them, and that it lights a spark in the hearts of our community and other people in the community to become involved. Those are the three things I really wanted to land, and I spend the last portion of the book talking about, so now you see the need. What are you going to do about it? And I talk directly with churches, I talk directly with civic organizations and individuals. What can you do to become involved and becoming part of the solution?
Well, Brett, again, thank you so much. Now, we're going to take a short break, and when we come back from The Gavel to Grace with Brett Knight, we're going to find out where we can buy this book and dig a little deeper, maybe into his favorite chapter and some inspiration behind the scenes of being an author. You're listening to Today in Putnam County, and I'm Shan Stout, and we'll see you right back after the break.
We're back with Today in Putnam County with Shan Stout.
Welcome back to Today in Putnam County, and if you are just now joining us, you've missed out on a lot of information, so we're going to do a quick recap. We are talking to author Brett Knight from The Gavel to Grace, and this is an inspirational book, but it's also, in your words, Brett, a how-to resource guide dealing with addiction.
Yeah.
Not only if you are the addict, but if you are a family member, a friend, part of that person's circle that you are trying to support them and help them, and you have a very diverse background. So we're going to recap. You know, you are a lawyer. You have worked within the system and seen all the cycle and recycle of people that are struggling with addiction through our justice system. You are a pastor, and so you have counseled and worked with families, and you've also struggled watching people decline with addiction and watching people succeed with addiction. And at some point, you decided that was not enough. I'm going to take on the task of writing a whole book.
Right.
Now, I think we have deciphered from The Gavel to Grace where the title is coming from, obviously, but your subtitle, Setting People Free from Addiction and Guiding Them into Healing, I think that's just as important as the title.
Yes.
Letting people know what this book, you know, what they can expect to receive through reading it.
Yes.
Now, Tessa, you've been very quiet through our interview today, but I see the wheels turning in your mind, and you look like you're holding on to a few questions. So fire away. Here's your chance.
Yeah, so I love to read, and this is about to be my 27th book, I think, for this year.
Congratulations,
Yes.
by the way.
I love it. If I have a free moment at
That's
home
awesome.
where I can hide from everyone I'm reading. So this is a good sized book. How long did it take you to write it?
I made the decision in January 2025. It was released in May 26th of 2026.
Wow.
So 18 months is the entire
That is
process.
a very fast turnaround.
That's
Let's just be
impressive.
clear. So note to any novices out there, that may not be the expectation if you decide to pick up your laptop and start writing a book.
And-
Well done.
Thank you. And I finished the manuscript in October. I finished it the fall of 2025, and in my mind, this is the first time I've ever sat down to write a book. And I thought, okay, I've written the manuscript. It's October. I'll have this out before Christmas, and it'll be the stocking stuffer for all my kids, because that's what they really want, right? And wow, did I have to learn that the editing process, that the formatting process, the audiobook recording process, all of that took a lot longer than I thought. And so here we
no
are.
stockings received your book.
Maybe this
yeah.
year, maybe 2026 will be their year to get what they've always wanted. that's what, I'll even sign it for them.
And let's go into that. You've got 5 kids.
Yes.
Now, they're grown.
Yes.
But in the middle, there's twins. Like you have a resume that is very expansive, including your family resume.
But the most important part of all of that is that made all of that effort worth it is we have one grandbaby.
Oh,
and she is the light of our lives. Yes, Ava Grace, she is the light of our lives, and she gets to come over. She lives local, so she gets to come over on Fridays and spend the night with us, and we spoil her rotten. So
and you only have one daughter, and so you were due another girl.
That's exactly right. We were due another girl for sure.
Well, congratulations.
Thank you. That's that's exciting. But maybe she'll get better than a book in her.
I guarantee there's going to be something very colorful in that stocking. Okay, Tessa, you had another question that we were talking during the break.
So, like I said, I'm a reader. I'm not an author. Cannot write a book. But I love to read about authors' process during the writing of their books. And everyone has always said that I learned something that I didn't know about myself in this process. So what is something that you've learned about yourself?
Well, the writing process, first of all, I'll tell you, I caught the writing bug by writing this book. I only wrote this book because I thought it was a great medium to get information out to people. And so that's why I wrote it, because I knew I could put it in the hands of people that maybe will never even meet me. But I really love the process. I love the diving in deeper, and I love language, I love communicating. I'm an attorney and a pastor.
But you seem so shy.
Good luck getting me to stop talking. I know, right? Yeah, that's exactly right. I'm usually just sitting there like a flower on the wall. But so I love that. This is just something else that gives me time to communicate in that way. But the process on this was a little bit different because I'm telling both information, but it's not just an information book. It has a whole lot of stories, people's stories in it, in there. So part of my process was I engaged those people into the writing of the book. I knew the stories that would fit into what I needed to teach and people who could bring it to life. And because I've worked with them, I reached out to them and said, "This is what I'm doing. Will you partner with me in this? Will you tell me your story again? I know I lived with you through this story, but will you tell me your story again?"
And from their perspective, recently we filmed a documentary where it was Waterfalls for All, and we worked with special needs, and our whole special needs community really rallied. But we reached out to several to share their specific experience, and especially those who had not been wheelchair bound for their whole lives, but in their adulthood, it was very vulnerable for them to tell their story.
Absolutely.
And there's no shame attached to that. So I would think with addiction, it would be exponentially harder to be vulnerable and tell a story where you feel like it begins in your personal failure, whatever that moment was.
That's right.
So was it difficult to convince people, or did they want to share their story hoping that maybe that could help others?
It was not difficult to convince them.
That's amazing.
But the thing is, and the underlying theme that runs through the entire book, is that oftentimes, the vast majority of times, people who are in addiction are dealing with some pain, some trauma from their childhood, some trauma from their adulthood, or there's some trauma in which they're numbing with this.
Well, and we call that self-medicating.
That's right.
Someone's self-medicating that pain and whatever their drug or alcohol of choice is.
That's right. And so when you remove the drugs or alcohol, the pain's still there. And if you don't deal with and heal the pain, then you're coming right back to the drugs and alcohol.
Sure.
So because of that underlying thing, it became would be even more difficult, even more shame attached, because I'm not only dealing with my drug and alcohol issue, I'm also going to talk about the underlying pain and abuse that happened in my life, the abuse that happened when I was a young girl, and the abuse that happened to me as a man during this time. And so we were dealing with that as well. So you would think it'd be even more difficult, but they didn't. They did not resist at all. Not a single person who I asked to participate didn't participate. Wow. They all wrote out their testimony, their story themselves, and then they handed it to me with permission to use what you want that fits into the book, and I did. And now I changed the names of anybody whose story I used because for their privacy, even though they didn't ask me to, but I wanted to. I wanted them to afford them that privacy. I left names in of people who are working in the recovery community, but I did not use the actual names of the people who told the stories. But those stories, they're what makes this book come alive. So that was part of my process, is receiving those stories and then molding them into the information that I was sharing, so that it wasn't just a feel good or make me cry kind of a story, but actually gave you information to move forward. And I really thought, one thing writing this as an author, I always had in my mind, I was telling the story to somebody. And I was always telling it to a mother. I was always telling it to a mom. And so a lot of these stories came out that way. And so that was difficult. That was a challenge because you really are asking them to dive into these emotional issues again.
It's a very vulnerable place.
And then you're going to dive into them with them. So it becomes a very difficult process to go through. And a lot of these people who are writing these stories, they've become personal friends of mine. They become like family members to me. And so it was difficult. So that was one aspect of diving into it as an author, was you're going to have to dive into the deep end, because that's where people who read this are going to find healing.
Yes.
And so you have to be willing to dive in, and you have to be willing to ask other people to dive in with you, which is why in the very beginning of the book I began talking about myself a little bit. And that was probably the part of the book I liked the least. Because I didn't really want to talk about myself at all. But I looked at it and I realized I'm asking people to talk about their stories. I don't have permission to do that. I'm asking people who are reading this to let this enter into their lives. I don't have permission to do that if I'm not willing to say, hey, here's some of my life too. It's not always been perfect, and I've not always made the best decisions, and I wasn't always on the right side of this issue. And so being able to explain that in the very beginning, I felt gave me at least then permission to enter into a conversation with them.
So you talk about, I love the fact that you are wrapping the information within a story. And so it's palatable. That makes it a book that is easier to read than just an informative, guidebook, But you talk about the information and the resources that you have in here. What are some of the things, because that's a vague term, what are some of the resources that, say, a mother who has a child that is suffering from addiction can expect to find in here?
We talk about the decision making of somebody who's in addiction, to be able to explain to them how those decisions are made. We talked about that briefly a few minutes ago. We also talk about looking for recovery. What does recovery look like? And I was very straightforward and honest about, here's based on my experience, here's what I look for in a recovery program. Here's what you should be seeing. What does long-term look like? What kind of a program fits well? What kind is actually providing the kind of care and healing that needs to take place, so that when a family member, let's say they do have a loved one who's willing to go into treatment at that time, well, not all treatments are equal. So here's some real practical things you should be looking for in there, especially if they're also justice involved. They're involved in the justice system. They have some charges because judges want you to be in programs where there's lots of communication going on back and forth. So there's things to look for in there. So there's very practical on that, and there's also very practical of ministries, organizations, and people who want to get involved. Here are things that you can do to start getting involved today.
So this is basically an empowerment resource, because I know when you sometimes land in something like addiction, and you know nothing about it, you don't know how to help them, you are just kind of in survival mode.
That's right.
Having questions and basically a guide, an outline of because they'll be like, what do you need? I have dealt with that before. We're like, we don't know what questions. Like, you're the expert.
Right.
What questions should we be asking? What do we need to know? And they're like, well, that's up to you. And you just feel like it's kind of doubling back on you, and you don't know. So this sounds like it's helping to pull the veil off of some of the confusion.
Yeah, and we talk even about the vocabulary that you're going to hear if you're talking with attorneys or that you're in the court system. Things
and that can be very intimidating.
Yeah, what is parole and probation, and how does that have to do with treatment? What's a furlough program? What's this? What's that? What's an indictment? All of these things that come at you really fast, especially, again, if I'm speaking to that kind of target audience, that mother who's maybe she's never been in the court system before. Now she finds a son or a daughter that's in there and has no clue what this even means.
Well, I think it's beautiful. Now, it took a village probably to write this book.
Yes, it did.
Do you have anyone you'd like to thank who helped support you or helped you with your resources?
Well, I think the main people to thank are all those stories that are in there. and of course they're all nameless in there, but
they know who they
all
are.
know who they are, and I know who they are, and they know that they're contributing to being the solution for the next people. I often describe addiction as burning houses in our community, and that each of us, we make a decision to go and grab one more out of that burning house, and they're grabbing somebody out of that burning house today by what they provided, by being willing to be vulnerable, and talk about what they've learned and what they went through and the mistakes that they made along the way.
Well, and I will say, people sometimes go, well, if you just saved one person, but if that was your one person,
that's right.
If that would have been my family member who could not recover from addiction, no matter how many times, we
right.
tried to help them, I would have definitely been the first person to
right.
buy this book and try to find a new way, a new path, a new question to ask, a new resource.
Yeah.
And I appreciate that you've taken this on. Now, the book is out.
Yes.
How can we find it?
Well, a lot of people are finding it on Amazon.com.
Absolutely.
It seems like everybody goes to Amazon, right? So first place, it's in hardback and softcover. It's audiobooks coming out. It's the ebook. So it's all the different platforms that you want.
Do you have
Amazon.
A social media page?
Yes, the social media page, Gavel to Grace on social media. My own personal social media, Brett Knight, that's there as well. I have a website, brettknight.com. You can go there, you can see the book, you can click it, it'll take you to Amazon. Other places that are distributing, like Ingram Spark, which they mainly give out to like bookstores and things of that nature. And I won't hesitate to say local bookstores will have it available to them. I was couldn't help it. I went on to one of our local bookstores, Plenty Bookstore down the road here. I went on their online store and I typed in Brett Knight, and there was my book. So you can order it right there off of Plenty Books. Go to their online store and you can buy the book right there as well.
Well, I hope to see you at a book signing soon. That would be fantastic.
I have said that I have signed so many of these books for local people that the challenge will be finding a book that doesn't have my signature on it. It may be worth something one day. If you can find a book that doesn't have my signature on it, it might be worth something.
Brett, thank you so much for spending your time with us today on the podcast. I appreciate my co-host Tessa Davis, and you have been listening to Today in Putnam County, and you'll want to get your copy from The Gavel to Grace, written by Brett Knight, ASAP, if you have anyone in your realm struggling with addiction, and this would be a great resource for you. We appreciate our guest today, and until we see you next week, enjoy the journey.
This has been Today in Putnam County with Shan Stout.